me a second.
All right, so I'm now pleased to introduce Gideon Juve from, who's at University of Southern California, ISI Institute, and he will tell us about workflows. Thank you.
Let me see if I can get back. Okay. Yeah, so I'm Gideon Juve, and I work at the USC Information Sciences Institute here in California. And I'm on the Pegasus team. We develop tools for scientists doing workflows. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about running scientific workflows in the cloud. So I can't see my slides up there. So I'm going to keep turning back and forth here until we get the slides sorted out. So here's sort of an outline, or a brief outline of what I'm going to talk about. First, I'll talk about what are scientific workflows for people who aren't familiar with that technology. Then I'll talk about workflows in clouds and why you might want to use clouds to run workflows, or why you might not want to. And then how would you go about deploying a workflow in the cloud. And then finally, I'll finish up talking about some studies that we've done evaluating the cost and performance of workflows in the cloud, and some case studies that we've done on various applications. So first off, what are scientific workflows? So scientists often need to, they have these problems where they need to integrate a lot of different application codes and a lot of different data sets that are produced by different groups, written by other scientists, and they need to bring them all together and integrate them into a single application. So they need to do things like automated data processing. They need to repeat processing steps on new data, so they need to create a pipeline, process data through it, and then when they get new data, they need to process it again. They need to reproduce previous results so that they can go back and validate results that they've created previously. They need to share their analysis often with other scientists who are working on similar problems so that they can apply the same processing steps to their data. They need to track provenance so that they can go back and make sure and find out what steps led to what codes produced a certain data product that they're using. They need to execute these analyses often in distributed environments in parallel on big supercomputers and clouds and things. And they need to reliably execute these on unreliable resources. So they don't want to spend a lot of time, babysitting their applications to make sure that they finish. They want to sort of launch them and get results later. And so scientific workflows provide solutions to these kinds of problems. So what are scientific workflows? They're the tools that orchestrate these complex multi-stage scientific computations. And they're expressed in these high-level workflow languages. And there's a lot of different workflow languages depending on what workflow management system you're using. The one that I work with, Pegasus, uses this directed acyclic graphs. And this is an example I'll show in a second of a DAG. There's scripting languages, there's data flow and control flow, representation, there's actors, and a lot of others. And it just depends on what workflow system you're working with. And one of the key things about these is they can automatically be parallelized on distributed resources. So this is an example of a typical science application, science workflow. This is epigenomics. This is an application that does basically bioinformatics. And so this graph here shows several processing steps and things that are being done in parallel. If I can get the mouse. So this first step just takes an input data set and splits it into a bunch of smaller chunks to be processed in parallel. These chunks are filtered and converted. The file formats are converted. The data is mapped to a reference genome. The mapped segments are merged together, and then at the end there's several steps to do analysis on the merge pipeline. So this is a very typical workflow application that a scientist might write in bioinformatics. So like I said, I work on the Pegasus workflow management system, and so the key thing about Pegasus is that it compiles these abstract workflows into concrete executable workflows. So what you can do is you can describe an application in very generic terms, saying, referring to data logically rather than by paths, and executables logically, and wire them all together. And then Pegasus can map that onto the distributed resources, so onto HPC clusters, local clusters, grids, and clouds, and I'll talk about the cloud part of it. And so Pegasus is really designed for scalability, and so right now sort of the limits of what the size of applications Pegasus can handle is sort of on the order of millions of tasks, thousands of computational resources, and terabytes of data, and we have applications that sort of are at that limit right now. One of the important things about Pegasus is it does not require application code changes. So a lot of scientific applications, like I said, are sort of put together from a lot of different codes that are collected from different scientists in the field. And so you might get a code from another researcher, and you just need to be able to plop it into your workflow and run it without modifying it. So Pegasus allows you to do that. And it has a lot of features, interesting features for high performance workflows and parallel workflows. For example, in data management, it can do replica selection. So if you have data replicated across a large grid, it'll choose data for you. It'll plan out all the data transfers that are required to move the data from where it's living now to where you can compute on it, and then back to where it's going to be stored permanently. It can create registration jobs to register data and replica catalogs. Can insert cleanup jobs to remove data, clean up after your workflow finishes. There's features for task clustering for performance. It allows you to run your computations reliably by retrying tasks and by allowing if the workflow fails, you can pick up where it left off after you resolve the issue. It snapshots the state of your workflow. There's monitoring, troubleshooting, provenance tracking, and optimizations that you can do at planning time, like workflow reduction, that reduce the amount of work you have to do to improve performance. And this is sort of the ecosystem that Pegasus lives in, and Pegasus here in the middle. So you can create workflows using a number of different tools. Most people use one of these scripting languages or APIs. We have APIs in Python, Perl, and Java that you can create an abstract workflow, write a workflow generator that then is input into Pegasus. There's also portals. There's other workflow composition tools. Wings is one that's also developed at ISI that uses semantic reasoning to generate workflows. And then once Pegasus gets it, it plans it and passes it off to Dagman, which is the workflow engine that manages the dependencies between tasks and retries in case of failures, and Condor, which is the scheduler and resource broker that can submit jobs out to those distributed resources, which are all these around here, like campus clusters or grids or our clouds. So this is a typical kind of application that we work on. And so this is a large-scale data-intensive workflow. This is called the Montage Galactic Plane. And so the goal here is to create a really large-scale image of the galactic plane. This is an astronomy application. And this little red box here is one tile of the whole image. And there are 900 tiles for one image. And there's 18 million input files that go into producing this. Each one of those images, 900 images, is 2.5 gigabytes in size, or for a total of about 2.4 terabytes. And there are 10.5 million tasks for producing this image, and that's about 34,000 CPU hours. And not only do they want to do this, all this computation to produce this image, they want to do it 17 times for different bands, so different infrared bands. So this is the kind of large scale on the very high end of what you can use a workflow, scientific workflow management system for. It will automatically parallelize this and distribute it and manage all the data for you so that you can get science done.